And we're back with more political fun. So, we're going to talk about the two party system and sort of the modern parties that we have today. One of the complaints I hear a lot is there's a whole lot of people who feel disaffected by the two party system we have. There's a whole lot of people that don't really like either the Democrats or the Republicans and would like to see a third party. So, why don't we have a third party, a major third party? Many democracies in the world have more than two parties. We only have two, though. Why is that? Well, there's no rule or law that says we have to, but these factors I'm going to talk about, I think, have sort of entrenched the two parties we have and make it very hard for a third one or fourth one to emerge. One is consensus of values. Disagreements between the two parties are not that stark. Democrats and Republicans historically, and hopefully this is still true today, have more in common than they have different. In some political systems, they have Communist Party, Fascist Party, et cetera, et cetera. So much more extreme than what we have. The Democrats and Republicans historically, and hopefully still do, mostly agree on the rules of the game, things like that. Part of it is simply inertia. Like why do we have two parties? We've always had two parties. And we pretty much have almost pretty much since the beginning of the country. So it would be very different if we all of a sudden didn't. Doesn't mean we can't, but you know as well as I do the fact that if somebody's always done something one way and you try to talk them into doing it a different way, most people, it's hard to get them to do it. Because even if the new way is better, it doesn't mean that they will do it that way. Like the metric system, right? Objectively, way simpler than the system we use, but we've always used the system we've used. So it just goes forward by momentum, basically. Winner take all, the Electoral College really incentivizes a two party system because you don't win in order to become president. You don't only have to win more electoral votes than any other candidate. You have to win a majority of electoral votes. So currently there are 538 potential electoral votes. The magic number thus is 270. 270 is 538 divided by 2 plus 1. So if you win 270 or more, you become president. If you win fewer than 270, you do not automatically become president. If we had three candidates, and let's say one got 260 electoral votes, one got 240 electoral votes, and one got 38 electoral votes, I think that adds up, then the one who got 260 doesn't automatically become president because that's less than 270. What would happen under that circumstance is it would be thrown to the House of Representatives to choose the president, and the Senate chooses the vice president. In the House of Representatives, each state delegation would get one vote, and whoever got the most votes would win. So if we had three political parties, a third major political party, that means that they would get roughly a third of the vote on average. So we would almost never have one candidate get more than half plus one, which means that every election pretty much should get thrown to the House, which is probably would not be healthy for us. I think. Imagine if one of our recent elections had been settled that way. I think we might have had some violence or something, or more than we had if that had happened, because it would be widely, whoever got it would be probably seen as illegitimate by maybe a majority of the country. So the Electoral College really incentivizes a two party system. If you want multiple parties, you probably have to get rid of the Electoral College and go to more of a parliamentary system, which, if you want to talk about that and what that is, take Intro to Political Science. And the two major parties don't typically want another competitor. They may want one in one election. If there's a sense that a third party is going to draw more votes away from one party than the other, then the party that stands to benefit may want them to get more attention. But generally, strategy is much more simple when you have only one party you're going up against. If you have two or more parties you're going up against, things get more complicated. So Democrats and Republicans may not agree on a lot, but they do agree they don't want another major political party to have to compete with. They'd rather compete simply with each other. So that kind of shuts out third parties as well. Effects is that, what the reason why people don't like the two-party system is we do get limited political choice. Candidates run from to the left or right in the primaries, depending on if they're a Democrat or Republican, but generally try to tack their way back to the middle in the general election. And this has the effect of generally, though not always, making extreme candidates less likely, though not necessarily. And again, this is a system that's largely created by the Electoral College. Now, does that mean that third parties have no importance, that they don't matter? No. Does it mean you're wasting your vote if you vote for a third party candidate? Some people would say yes. I would disagree. I would say no. But I would say, though, that if you vote for a third party, it's more of you probably should think more long term than short term. If you vote for a third party, you probably know going in that your vote, whoever you vote for, is not going to win. And so the lesser of two evils among the two major candidates would be who you would otherwise vote for. So you hurt that one more. So it makes it more likely that the greater of two evils will win. Still, we have seen instances where third parties have had an effect. Ross Perot in 92 ran and got 19% of the vote. I think that's the strongest showing by a third party since Teddy Roosevelt in 1912. And so he didn't win, but the message he ran on was anti-NAFTA and anti-budget deficit. And as a result of that, Republicans looked at why people went to Perot and adjusted their message accordingly. And ultimately, they ended up balancing the budget by the late 90s. So if someone loses an election, typically the parties will look at the third party candidate, see why voters went to them, what concerns they had, and then try to win those over. So this can have an effect, but it's, again, at best a long-term effect. Short-term, you're probably not going to get what you want. All right. Political ideology about how government should work defines our party system. So Democrats and Republicans are really obviously divided by ideology here. Roosevelt is, although you can argue that Thomas Jefferson or Andrew Jackson were the founders of the Democratic Party, and they were in a sense. But today's Democratic Party probably owes more to Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. This idea, of using the power of the government to try to alleviate poverty, things like that. This is very, very New Deal era ideology. Whereas the Republicans are going to be more skeptical of this. So that's where they come in. Also, Lyndon Johnson, you could argue, is very influential as well through the Great Society, which was kind of an extension of the New Deal. Things like Medicare and Medicaid started as a result of that. And also the Voting Rights Act of 64 and the Civil Rights Act of 65 had the effect of moving African-American voters over to the Democratic Party, where the vast majority of them still are. Republicans, African-Americans voted for Republicans for over 70 years, from time of Lincoln up until 1932. I believe Herbert Hoover, even though he lost the 32 election in a landslide, won a majority of African-American voters. But in 36, most African-Americans voted for Roosevelt, and no Democrat for president has lost the African-American vote since then. Nixon comes about sort of what was called the Southern Strategy, which is kind of a backlash against what a lot of people perceived as too much expansion of federal government and federal power. And so we see sort of conservatism rise here too. And the Republicans, they can be traced back to Lincoln, and Lincoln can be said to be the founder of the Republican Party, but similar, but he's pretty far, like Jefferson and Jackson, he's pretty far back in history at this point. I would say modern Republicans probably owe more to Reagan, or at least have more in common with Reagan, who ran sort of a campaign of like traditional conservatism, religion, religious right, limited government, et cetera, et cetera. And so this led really to the South becoming much more conservative. The South was overwhelmingly Democratic up until the 1950s, 1960s. As Republican as it is today, it probably was even more Democratic back then. So things can change pretty fast, is what I'm saying. Is there a difference between Democrats and Republicans? I think the answer is yes. Some people say there's not, but I think they are mistaken. If you look at votes in Congress, the overwhelming majority of votes are party line votes, which means almost all Democrats are on one side and almost all Republicans are on the other side. There has been some decline in party loyalty lately. About a third of Americans identify as independents again. That's overstated a little bit, but the fact, of course, that even if you do tend to vote for one party, the fact that you identify as independent probably suggests you don't want to identify too closely with that party. Split voting is a little more common. You may vote for Republican for president and Democrat for governor, or vice versa. This isn't particularly uncommon. We see senators and governors of one party win even as their state goes to the presidential nominee of another party. Party's gonna go away? I would guess not. Modern Democrats, you can read this. Modern Republicans, don't necessarily know that I need to read that either. I think we've summed that up pretty well. So we will pick up next talking about elections. So I will see you all soon. Have a good rest of your day.